right, I'm Augusta Myers, and we're here with Sheriff Manuel Gonzalez III and Under Sheriff Larry Corin from the Bernalillo County Sheriff's Office. And we were just talking how it's really the office of the Bernalillo County Sheriff's. And why is that? Why is it not a department?
It's an office because the sheriff is elected into office. So by that proxy of being voted in, you become an office just like the mayor's office.
There's a difference between being elected and appointed. As far as Albuquerque Police Department, their chief is appointed. You were voted into office by the citizens of Bernalillo County.
Yes. Obviously, if you're the governor, the mayor, they have appointees. And in my seat, it becomes a constitutional voted office. So the people actually elect me into office.
And then do you select Under Sheriff Larry Corin?
Then I have my appointees, and I have two under sheriffs, and that has been the first time in the history of New Mexico. I'm the first sheriff to ever have two under sheriffs.
And did you make that decision?
Yes, I made that decision. It went in front of the county commission for an administrative resolution. I was able to make that decision, and I have two under sheriffs, and it's been the best decision I made.
How so?
The sheriff's office is a very dynamic office, and it's hard for one person to be able to operate that whole department by themselves. I thought to be able to break it up into two different bureaus, having them share that responsibility, two heads are better than one. Mm-hmm. It just better for feedback, it's better for ideas, it's better for production and efficiency. And obviously, because I picked two very qualified and experts in law enforcement, it's really elevated our image, our profile, and just our performance.
And speaking of elevating the performance, Under Sheriff Corin, what are your duties as far as the Under Sheriff?
So right now I oversee the administrative side of things. That includes training, the Judicial Operations Division, the Academy, and a lot of the budgeting items and concerns that we come across. And we handle a lot of those aspects of the department. I think one thing that the sheriff was kind of alluding to is we kind of avoid this idea of soliloquies where people are just coming together just to agree. By having that third opinion, we were able to have a little lively discussion and debate on issues and make an educated, informed decision and rational decision on what we're going to do each step of the way.
Kind of impartiality, you
Exactly.
have a little bit of like you said, a few different voices making the decisions, and I'm sure that's helped you, Sheriff.
Oh, absolutely. I think about it every day. I tell them, don't ever let me leave my office making a bad decision. So they have some ownership in that decision. They're well thought out, they're researched, and obviously I value their opinions. And
so the roles of the sheriff and the undersheriffs, how do you break those up?
As a sheriff, I'm the ultimate decision maker, and I'm the commander of the sheriff's office. The roles of the undersheriffs, theirs is to help me on a day-to-day basis, operations, managing the department. So they need to be well aware of their whatever roles and responsibilities I assign them to. We'll talk about the goals and the direction and how we're going to get there. So they're part of the strategic management of our vision and how to carry that. And so we have to come up with these strategies of how we're going to get things accomplished. So they're key in that. And they're key in terms of communicating that down, the chain of command, so that we're successful in all these things we want to do.
And let's face it, you can't be everywhere all the time. And so that's kind of like having a few more sets of eyes and ears. And that's probably really helpful on a day-to-day basis. So you probably meet with them regularly.
Constantly phone calls. This isn't an 8 to 5 job. They're calling me constantly, even through the evening. Sometimes we'll get those calls in the middle of the night in crisis. So this is an ongoing thing that never goes away. Even if they're on vacation, you're in constant communication with them.
And one of the things I wanted to talk to you about, how are the Bernalillo County Sheriff's Office policies made? How do you guys come up with stuff like this?
Oftentimes, you'll see issues that come up throughout the country. We have a policy committee, and we also have our own expertise. So sometimes those will be developed through sharing information amongst our administration. But when they go to the committee, they'll do research. They'll do research based on state statutes. They'll look at the 10th Circuit where that drives us in our decision. So they're court rulings, and also the Supreme Court. So all ours are based on the rule of law. And ultimately, they're finalized and approved by the state of New Mexico. So there is a process. We don't arbitrarily make policies up, and I think that is sometimes
what people think.
Yeah,
exactly.
People think it's a misunderstanding.
How'd you come up with that one, right?
Yes,
it's based on, and the laws evolve. Like you said, it may be a Supreme Court case. It may come down from the 10th Circuit, but it's evolving. And so the latest case will often predicate or dictate how this is going to go.
Absolutely. And the bottom line is they're lawful.
They're lawful.
They're
I think a
lawful
lot of
process.
people would be happy to hear that. You just don't come up with them. You're not just thinking of different laws to create.
making
There you
these
go.
up, yeah.
And some of them, some of these laws or these policy changes come around because of a need by the community. The community is wanting to see some sort of change in the way we handle crime, and so sometimes we have to respond to that and still abide by all the laws that are there.
And I think a lot of people, when they think of law enforcement, they probably lump the Albuquerque Police Department, New Mexico State Police, the Sheriff's Office, everybody under one umbrella. But they're different and separated by, if nothing else, at least jurisdictions.
Yes, but oftentimes I think that reason is because if you get stopped by a law enforcement officer, it probably doesn't matter what uniform, you're going to obviously be a little bit nervous. But in terms of jurisdiction, the way it goes is in the unincorporated areas, that's the sheriff's office. If there's a city officer, there's a city tax base. In those incorporated areas, you're going to get a city service, which is the Albuquerque Police Department. Here in Bernalillo County, in the unincorporated areas, you're going to get service by the Sheriff's Office.
And state police would be the highways mostly.
Yeah, the state police, their main mission is to provide services on the highway, but obviously they do have law enforcement powers, and they're appreciated when they come and work with us because oftentimes there's been some events that are very high profile, and they become issues like protest that sometimes we need to collaborate and work jointly in order to accomplish those missions.
And really, the sheriff's jurisdiction, when you're talking about the East Mountains all the way to the far reaches of the South Valley, to the west side, your area, just physically, land-wise, is pretty big.
Yes, it is. It's a large area to cover. There's not as many residents in the county, but just the geographical boundaries and some of the other geographical features create different issues for us when it comes to service.
How do you feel like you keep your finger on the pulse of what's going on in the county with that much ground to cover? I know there's some creative ways you'll hold briefings in certain parts of the county so that people see that there's a presence there.
I believe that those are really face-to-face interactions with the public. So we've created some different ways to create law enforcement opportunities between us. And one of those is through community outreach. So if you have a problem, let's say, for instance, you're in the industrial area and you're experiencing some type of theft during the holidays because that seems to drive that type of crime. So we would go out to that respective business, meet with the business owner, and then stage or hold a briefing there so that they can visibly see that we're there and plant it in the minds of the people that are thinking about these opportunities to commit crime to think twice about it, and then to get information, share that information. And I think when they see us communicating and we're engaged with the community, it makes a huge difference. And we always get the feedback is it's a positive thing.
People like that.
They love it.
How do you recruit, and what is the basis for how you bring officers into the department?
There's many different ways, but I think the strongest is just almost like any business. It's word of mouth. Based on the environment I believe you create for the agency that you're the head of, is that people are going to see if other people like working there or love working there. I feel like I've never worked a day in my life because I love what I do. If you create that environment for everybody, then it's going to be contagious. And when somebody's looking to be in a position where they want to be in a service position, and I always say that what's more important than protecting the lives, property, and rights of people? I haven't found one yet. So when there's something that important and somebody wants to be part of it, we want to make sure that we're picking the absolutely most qualified people.
Kind of creating an environment where people would want to come to work.
Absolutely.
And do you feel like that's at work in the department, Under Sheriff?
Absolutely. We often refer to it in the Sheriff's Department as having our special culture, and it's a positive culture. It's a culture that people want to work in and be productive in.
Now, there's officer training, and then there's also the Citizens Academy. How does that work?
These are people who are civic-minded, who maybe they're not volunteers, but they're interested in their community. They're interested in public safety, primarily law enforcement. They want to do something, or at least they want to hear about what's going on in their community. And so we offer them this opportunity to get involved in a Citizens Academy. It's basically, if you think about it, it's kind of like a college course that you would take, where you're going to meet once a week at the academy and go through kind of a condensed version, just kind of highlighting every unit in our department and some of the things that we do. They get a chance to drive a patrol car simulator. They get a chance to get on a firearms simulator as well. They get to talk and have this dialogue with detectives and deputies and learn a lot more about our department.
Kind of see what it's like firsthand to actually be a sheriff's officer.
Exactly.
Not just that person who, as we used to see in the old days, the nosy neighbor, but somebody who, like you said, kind of civic-minded and interested in helping be part of the solution in the community. Crime is kind of out of control right now, or it seems that way. You hear a lot more of it. and or maybe there's more of a focus on it, but do you feel like it's one of these things that's just a challenge right now?
I think so. I don't think we can hide from it. I think it's a fact. It's a discussion that people are talking most about. I think that sometimes people don't want to have that conversation. It's an elephant in the room that nobody wants to talk about, but it's here. And when you're being victimized that frequently, I think you have to bring it up. You have to address it, and we have to have a solution to that problem.
Also, there's student support deputies.
No, it's kind of a takeoff from the school resource officers, but we're going to have these deputies in the elementary schools. It's to help address bullying and neglect, and maybe kids that are going to school hungry. Maybe they just have smaller issues that they need to be addressed, and that we can introduce a social worker, but it's really to get them the resources they need so they can be successful in school. So we're trying to deal with things on the front end instead of when they're handing them off after they graduate, and then it's just a little too hard to deal with them at that point.
Maybe a little too late, too.
A little too late. And maybe they just needed that support. And that's why we're looking at that deputy as being maybe that bridge between their success. So we're excited about the program. We think it's going to be very successful. And it's just a matter of selecting those right deputies for that assignment.
Now, as far as crime strategies, how do you work with the jail? You've got a behavioral health component now. There's a lot of collaboration, a lot of cross-culture that goes on within the county and the other departments.
We're all just a piece of the puzzle in the criminal justice puzzle, and all of us have a role in that process and in that criminal justice system. So for us, it's kind of making sure that we're doing our part and being responsible and being as productive as possible, but also asking the other stakeholders that we're collaborating with, what do we need to do together to make this a better place to live, a safer community to live? And so we just kick ideas around and we work together to figure out how to get there. So those strategies are from legislative ideas to business stakeholders to the community outreach we were talking about, reaching out to the faith-based groups and just the citizen, and mobilizing them and to figure out maybe we do need a nosy neighbor just to give us information, right? That Gladys Kravitz to kind of reach out to us and say, hey, you know what? This is what we need. We need you to be nosy so we can understand what's going on so we can help you solve your problems.
Kind of helps you keep your finger on the pulse of what's going on in the community. You know, one of the things you mentioned was BCSO has a decentralized command staff. What does that mean?
We have a decentralized approach to law enforcement, so that trickles down into your command approach of solving problems. My opinion is that we became too specialized, and so you over-specialized and you started focusing, but you started losing sight of community policing and getting out in the community and understand what was going on and being in your neighborhood and interacting with the public. And so now we're back to where we're saying, you know what, we need to be in the communities, we need to be engaged, we need to know what's going on. So what we've done is we've taken as many of our staff and place them back into the community to include our detectives and as many resources. And in the chain of command, we've noticed that since I've been there, the captains were always downtown. But we said they're the ones that have the authority, they have the experience, they have the knowledge, and they have the qualifications to make those decisions. So we placed them back out there to engage with the neighborhood associations and the public that were walking into the substations to say, this is my problem, and they have solutions to their problems. So they work together and they're able to come up with solutions that the community is very satisfied and happy with.
It's funny, you know, the pendulum swings back the other way, and you kind of get back to the basics of what real police work is. We think that the days are gone when you saw officers walking the beat, but you know, they're in our community, it sounds like, with the sheriff's office. And those various initiatives and divisions, I mean, there's a lot of them. There's everything from the air support unit to the animal
cruelty task force,
criminal investigation division, all kinds, domestic violence. I know that you recently had handled the largest human trafficking case in the state.
Yes, and it's currently still in the process. So that case is going to go federal, and that goes back to, I believe, creating the environment where your people feel empowered and supported. And so now our staff is willing to look at victim-centric type cases and take them to the next level federally, where there's real teeth in the prosecution. These are serious matters that sometimes people are figuring out, how do I break through to get involved in a human trafficking case? Nobody's really figured that out. What our ghost unit did, they look at victims that are being overlooked and missing and exploited children because of their expertise with technology and the crimes that are on the internet and what have have you. They've been able to elevate their level of investigation by focusing on the victim. And this has really created this synergy and investigation, again, to be able to accomplish what they did is all eyes are on them. And right now, everybody's trying to emulate that unit, and everybody's trying to figure out how did you get there and how are we going to share this information so we can have a more impact on this crime that's not really being addressed.
Well, and it's learning as you go by keeping in touch with the community because, human trafficking wasn't something that we even really talked about much even 10 years ago.
I think you kind of get your media perception maybe from a movie like Taken.
Right.
And so
right.
that sensationalism of that, but it's a real problem. And usually those children that are being exploited are under 18. So you have to look at those people that are being forgotten about, those teenagers that are running away from home and not really understanding what their resources are out there, but they fall into the community where these people are preying on them. And once they have access to them, then, it's very hard to keep track of them.
Absolutely.
There's a lot of technology that goes into these investigations as well. The detectives working with the Ghost Unit spend a lot of time actually on the computer surfing for victims and people who are engaged in the human trafficking.
Through social media.
Yeah, through social media.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. So it's kind of interesting. We have detectives that were at one time centralized in office space, but may not even been at their offices, and they were operating on their phones and their computers, but they weren't engaging in the community. And going back to the sheriff and decentralizing, he made sure to get them back out in the community. Basically, it comes down to you can take all this information from technology, but at some point you still need to have boots on the ground and making that face-to-face contact.
There's no substitute for talking to real people in the community. You never know, and I'm sure it's been the case where you've been talking, maybe having a briefing out in the community, and somebody brings something up that they may not have brought up earlier or brought to your attention if you weren't out there looking to talk to people in the community to find these things out, just little things that probably give them clues.
And we're just trying to look for other ways to enhance that. So in the future, we're going to develop a sheriff's app so the public can interact with this better, because we know we're in the digital age where this generation communicates via technology, smartphone, and I know so does 80% of the population across the country. So we know that that's the next movement. So we're staying up with what's current and what's trending, and we know we're going to be more effective because of that.
There's a whole generation of people who you might get a text from, but if you try to call them, they're not going to answer their phone. So you got to get on social media and you got to text. That's just the way it is.
It gets me so mad because I love phone calls.
I know, I do too. I like that interaction, but we're old school, Sheriff. I hate to tell you.
Some of the questions that I know often come up. Here I am, I'm living in this area of the city or county, and I'm not sure where the county ends and where the city begins. And so that's something that often comes up. And Sheriff, you want to help somebody determine where the county ends and where the city begins, and whether or not even that's important?
For us, it's not important, but I guess the way we can really have people understand it better is that sometimes when people make phone calls for their service, they're going to call 242 cops, or they're going to call 798-7000 to get a response from us. And really that burden is put onto the dispatchers and the computer-aided dispatch that we have, and that's a sophisticated system that figures out who gets what service. So
what you're saying is you don't have to worry about it.
And you don't
if someone calls, dispatch will figure out,
they will figure it out
by your location where the call needs to go.
Yes.
So what is the best way for people to ask a question of the Bernalillo County Sheriff's Office?
First off, just remember that if you do have an emergency, call 911.
Yes.
If it's a non-emergency and you still need an officer to respond or a deputy to respond, they could dial 798-7000. If it's just to connect with us and ask some general questions about the Sheriff's Department, things like the Citizens Academy and things of that nature, or just have a dialogue with somebody in the Sheriff's Department, I'd encourage you to go ahead and just connect with us through Facebook, and that's Bernalillo County Sheriff's Office.
And that's the best way. All right. Thank you, guys. Thanks for joining us, and we'll be talking about all kinds of topics in the coming months.
Thank you.
Thank you.
If you have a question for us, send it to us on Facebook at the Bernalillo County Sheriff's Office, and we just might read it on the air. And thanks for listening.